Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Mike Francesa podcast on the Bet Rivers Network on this St. Patrick's Eve, brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. Casamigos Tequila is brought to you by those who drink it. We're on the Mike Francesa channel, on the Bet Rivers Network, on YouTube, on this St. Patrick's Eve, as we finally have the field on the road to the Final Four, and we get ready for what is one of the great sporting events. Listen, college athletics has incredible problems. They have mountainous issues to deal with. They are probably all unsolvable in the real world. But when you take just a sporting event, there is none that jams more action, more drama, more charm into a couple of weeks than does the NCAA tournament. Listen, I admit, starting Tuesday night when they throw them up for the playing games, which I've never been a fan of, Thursday when everything gets rocking at 12, and you start at 12, and it's before you know it, it's midnight, and you've gone through a gazillion games, which I'm used to doing because it's what I did my whole life. First, go back to the years where the only ones watching those games were Jim Nance and myself in a room called MP2, where nobody joined us until about 7 o'clock at night, and we weren't on till 11:30 on Thursday night. CBS did one game, and we'd get there at noon. We would stay in the city. We would walk down 57th Street to the broadcast center. We would be there at noon. People would start showing up. I mean, newscasters. Dan Rather would stop in to see how a team was doing. Somebody from a soap opera would stop in, and they'd be filming soap operas in the hall around us. Okay, you'd hear the calls for the soap operas as we were sitting there watching these games. And in those days, those games were on ESPN. The tournament's so different. It's morphed through stages that nobody even remembers anymore. It's so different now. And people are talking about expansion, which would be ridiculous. And also, it's lost a lot of its charm because now you have these monster leagues. So you have so many teams coming out of one league that there's not even any league representation anymore. It's so different than it used to be. But what it's still about is you put a bunch of powerful teams and a bunch of mid-majors and some teams that qualify, small schools, big schools, little schools, tough schools, great schools, bad schools, great coaches, young coaches, old coaches, and you mix them all up and you see in a one and done format how it works out. And it always works out. Last year, we had a team completely dominate the tournament. Do I expect to see that again? Not on that level. I haven't seen a team since the days of probably the Walton gang dominate the way Yukon did the last 2 years, especially last year, where they didn't play any close games. The last close game that Yukon played, I was at, which was a 95-90 Big East loss by St. John's, who should have been in the NCAA tournament last year, and it stung them that they weren't. But they weren't really good. They would have won maybe a game if they were lucky. This year, though, they're the real deal, and they've had obviously a magical season, and now they go in as a 2 seed, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But the tournament still has, even though NIL has taken a lot of it away, because the mid-majors are not nearly as strong anymore. Why? Because the way the mid-majors got strong was, and got competitive was, they would build a good team over a period of years. They'd start, and they'd get in the tournament as sophomores, and they'd lose. And then they'd get in as juniors and maybe lose a tight game. And they get in as seniors. They'd been there 3 years in a row, and they'd win. And maybe win 2 or 3 games. And this thing is a occupational ladder for coaches. If you're an unknown coach and you win 2 games in the NCAA tournament, you're not unknown anymore. As a matter of fact, you got job offers coming up right, left, and sideways. 2 games get you a new job. That's all there is to it. If you're a small school and your guy wins 2 games, goodbye. He's gone. He's going to another school. That's the way this works. It's an upwardly mobile profession until you get to the guys where you'll have a bracket where you have 3 Hall of Famers in Pitino, Self, and Calipari. And wouldn't it be fun, for someone who's gone through the things I've gone through in life with those two guys, the idea of John and Rick meeting is just it's just funny. It's just on so many layers. It's funny. If it I hope it happens because it would just be theatrical more than anything else. But especially in Providence. But the bottom line is, it's still the same thing. Although the NIL has made it different, it's really weakened the middle teams. Not that you can't get an upset. Hey, Drake could pull an upset. UC San Diego could pull an upset. You're going to get some upsets along the way. Maybe McNeese upsets somebody. There's some good teams in there, but not as many as we had for years, where some of those teams were starting to get pretty powerful because you were getting the one and dones in the bigger leagues. Now things are changing because everybody's borrowed. It's a completely different process now. It's a once and out deal. Cooper Flagg got paid a lot of money to go to Duke. It's not going to be at Duke next year. He's going to be the number one pick in the draft. And Duke's going to have to start over. Now, Duke will start over and get a whole bunch of other guys. They'll bring some guys who are upperclassmen in from here, there, and there, and then they'll get one or two top recruits, and they'll go at it again. That's the way this works now. There's no way around it. You're not going to keep a Cooper Flagg for years. It just doesn't work that way. Now, on Sunday night, the old adage is to look at how did they seed the tournament? Did they make one bracket stronger than the others, weaker than the others? The answer is yes. They made one weaker than the others, which I'll get to. And did anybody really get royally screwed? Now, a lot of people are mad that Carolina's in the tournament. I'm not, for this reason. I know they didn't win quad one games. I know their quad one record was 1-12. Okay, fine. All right. And Xavier's was 1-9. Fine. Xavier's not a bad club. They're playing good basketball now. Carolina's not going to go in this tournament and embarrass themselves. And if you're going to think I'm going to get upset because Carolina's in and Boise's out or Ohio State is out, I'm not. That's all there is to it. I'm not going to worry about that. It doesn't bother me. Those or Indiana's out. Those teams didn't play that well. If they got in and if somebody else got in and Carolina wasn't in, I wouldn't lose any sleep over that either. It doesn't really matter. One got in, one didn't. They decide which way they want to do it. Carolina goes and plays everybody, and they like to reward people for doing that. And the SEC was that strong this year. That's why they have all these teams in there. That's why they're seeded the way they are. Although I really thought they overseeded one of their teams. You want to pick which one it is? To me, without question, it's Kentucky. Kentucky is not a 3 seed. Now, Iowa State, which I loved going into this tournament, is not going to go in healthy. They're a 3 seed, and they're not a 3 seed because they're not healthy. And we know already that one of their two guys who's been hurt is not going to play in the tournament. We don't know about the other yet. If they're without both, they might not win. I mean, they'll get through their first game because of who they are. They might not get through the second game. And that's a team that healthy this year was as good as just about any team in the country. They were that good. Would you be worried about Auburn? Yeah, I would. You know what? Auburn's lost 3 of its last 4 games, and the one they won against Ole Miss, they weren't impressive. They've hit a bit of a wall, and that can be symbolic at this time of year. Would I be worried about them? I would. I would be worried about them. Are you worried about Cooper Flagg's ankle? You should be. Are you worried about Alabama's injuries? You should be, because if they're not 100%, those teams are going to get hurt. There's no question about it. But Duke, let's get it out of the way right now. I always looked, and I have a different way of doing this. What I do is, as the bracket is unfolded, I put the teams that I consider significant teams in each bracket into the 4 columns as they come up on the board. And I write them into that place behind the 1 seeds. I mean, we knew what the 1 seeds were going to be. We knew they were going to be Duke, Auburn, Houston, and Florida. We knew that. I figured once the way this shook out and Michigan State lost, I thought there was no way St. John's could wind up in the East with Duke, which was either going to be the 1 or the 2. They wound up being the 2 overall, because St. John's is probably on that curve they use is probably 5 or 6. And with that being the case, they were going to wind up outside. I would have liked them to go to Newark. I would have loved to see or hoped to see a Duke St. John's regional final in Newark. I would have gone to that. I would actually got a ticket and gone to that, or got a credential and gone to that. That would have, I would have got a ticket because I would have taken some people to the game. But the bottom line is that game would compel me to go see it. That's how good that game would be. Not that Florida St. John's wouldn't be a great, and St. John's. Let's be honest. I think they got, since everyone wants to talk about them, I think their first weekend could not be set up better. I love their first round matchup. That team's not going to know what hit them, Omaha. I love their weekend matchup. And remember, I've always viewed it the way that Mike Krzyzewski always viewed it. That's a good guy to follow, okay, when it comes to the NCAA tournament. And he always believed in, and you even heard their head coach talk about it tonight on ESPN with Jay Billis, the idea that that's the way they were taught, which was you play 3, 4 team, and in this case, first time 5, because there's a team that they have to prepare for because they're going to play somebody from the playing game. But you prepare for the teams for the first weekend. Then you go home and you prepare for the teams for the second weekend. And then if you're lucky enough, you go home and you prepare for the teams for the final weekend. It is 3 2-game, 4-team tournaments. Win them all, you're the national champion. 6 games, good night. That's how you do it. That's the way Coach K always taught it. You don't then have to look at this with overwhelming, oh, look at all these teams, look at how many great teams there are. It's only the teams in your path. So when I look at the first 2-game, 4-team tournament that St. John's will play, I love the matchups for them. I told you with St. John's, a lot of it's going to be matchups. Now, the second weekend, they're going to have, unless there's going to be some upsets, they're going to have their work cut out for them. If form holds, they play Texas Tech and then Florida. If they can beat Texas Tech and turn around and beat Florida on the weekend, you know what? Then give Pitino any award you want to give him, because that would be an incredible achievement. Because Texas Tech is going to be a very, very tough matchup if they're standing there. And Florida will be, without question, the toughest matchup they will play this year, and is as tough as just about any matchup they could face. Right now, it's a tougher matchup than Auburn. Right now, I believe it's even for them a tougher matchup than Duke. The only matchup I would think would be possibly worse would be Houston, which is not a good matchup for St. John's, because in a lot of ways it's like looking in the mirror. And they've been doing it longer. I like where St. John's is right now. I don't like the fact that Richmond will not make a free throw in a big spot. He really, yesterday in the Creighton game. Now let's talk a little about St. John's yesterday for a second. St. John's was intimidated by the big man of Creighton yesterday, to a point where I was very surprised. Even into the second half, he played a one-man zone. He said to Zuby, "Go ahead, shoot." Zuby didn't want to shoot that shot, and he also didn't want to take the ball to him. But Lewis, who has been an incredible driver and an incredible player around the rim all year, took the ball twice in the first half at their big man, who's a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year in the Big East, and he blocked both shots. Second time he might have fouled them, but the bottom line is he blocked both shots. He stuffed them both times. Third time, early in the second half, when he had a chance to attack him, he didn't. And I was like, whoa. St. John's hadn't backed down a lot this year at the rim. Pitino then told them at the half and really tried to send it home early in the second half, attack this team. But the best way to attack him was to move the center and make him run up and down the floor because he's exhausted. They had tough games. They played 2 overtimes against DePaul. They had a tough game against Yukon, and now run him up and down the floor. Well, once that started, and the guy who changed that game, remember, that game wound up being a blowout, and it was a coast win in the last 5 minutes. I mean, the game was over with 5 minutes to play. It went from being a very close game to a blowout in a matter of 3 minutes on the clock. That game was 52-50. And when they called that dumb, now I also blame Lewis, who had a great second half, 27 points in the second half, for making that gesture. My kids were arguing with me, Daddy's allowed to make that gesture. Bridges makes it all the time. Why do you have to always make a gesture when you score? Why can't you just go back and play defense? Why is it always about you instead of the team? But that's the new world. I understand that. I should understand it. I've been watching it long enough. Well, he thought he was shooting a gun. Instead, he was, making a 3 signal, as Patino tried to explain to him. But they got a technical there. Well, that kind of flipped the switch for St. John's. The next 2 possessions, Richmond took the ball right to the front of the rim and laid it in. Now they're up 6. They got a turnover. They were up 8. They called timeout. That game was over. Next thing you know, went from 8 to 16. Good night, the lights. That's where they flicked the switch and they started attacking and they started getting out in the full. In the first half, they didn't get one fast break basket. They have to have fast break baskets because they don't score well enough or shoot well enough in the half court. And they were intimidated by the big man. But they're not going to see a lot of shot blockers like him in this tournament. It's not going to happen. But then they took over the game and wore them down and wore them out the way Patino does. How many games have you seen this year where the game has gone from St. John's down 2 or 4 at the half to St. John's edging to a lead after 4 or 5 minutes of play, to edging to a bigger lead, to edging to a bigger lead, to edging to a bigger lead? Why? Because this is all by design. It's all based on their conditioning. It's based on how Patino builds this. He is a master at this stuff. Now, a lot of people I see now everywhere, oh, he's the greatest coach of all time. It's a silly debate. Why have it? You want to say he's the best program builder of all time? Maybe. He's built more programs than anybody else. We know that. He took a ragtag Providence team to the Final Four. He took over Kentucky when they were in a terrible state, but he had 7 pros on his team that won the championship there, and they were just loaded. Absolutely loaded. They were a great team, an overwhelming team. And then he won a championship at Louisville. And now he's taken St. John's back to the promised land. He builds programs, no question. Does that make him better than Mike Krzyzewski? No. Does it make him better than Jim Calhoun? No. Does it make him better than Bob Knight? No. So why even go there? It's not worth it. But he's done a brilliant job, and he's an all-time great. That should be good enough. You don't have to make him the greatest ever. It's going to be hard to do when you have names like Wooden and Rupp and Knight and guys like that to talk about. But it's not important. He is an all-time great. We know that. And what he's done here has been nothing short of brilliant. And he is a great tournament coach. Nobody is going to get the better of him coaching in the tournament. Nobody's going to get the better of him inside a game. He's as good as they come. Nobody's better. He might not be better than every one of these guys historically, but he is as good as they come. He is always going to be prepared. His team is always going to be ready. They are always going to make the adjustments they have to make. They are going to get every advantage that a coach can give the team. And in the NCAA tournament, it's about mental and physical preparation, getting your team honed, getting your team prepared, giving your team what it needs to win, which means stuff that other teams haven't seen, which means how to handle adjustments when they show you something that you weren't prepared for. And also working in on the short end of the week. Okay, the 5-day Sunday or Saturday to Thursday or Sunday to Friday days off are very easy for teams to prepare for. The hard part is getting your team ready and having their legs right for the second game after a hard Thursday or Friday outing, having them ready for and prepared mentally, having prepared in terms of what they're going to see, and have them prepared for what they have to execute, and having them rested for the weekend game. That's the key. You're not going to beat the great coach from Sunday to Friday. You might beat him Friday to Sunday because it's harder to indoctrinate and get everything to the team and get the team ready in every single way. I know games been lost where a coach has told me after a championship game, we had a brutal game. The other team had an easy game. I kept my team off their feet at the risk of not preparing them the way I wanted to on Sunday because they were just so dog tired, and they lost on Monday night. I've had guys tell me that. I'm not going to say which ones, but I've had guys tell me that. That adjustment is where those guys earn their money. The second part of the weekend, as the stakes get better, and the level of play gets better. First weekend, if you're a top 12 team, you should physically overwhelm your opponents. If the second weekend you are playing teams that are very dangerous, the third weekend you're playing teams that are your equal or better. That's the way it works. That's why winning 6 games in this thing is very hard. That's why what Danny Hurley did the last 2 years was so exemplary. The way they were just on game, but they were overpowering. And it's funny, their assistant Moore told me at the Garden last year when we put Castle in this, we're putting Castle in the lineup today. That was against St. John's in early February. I think it was February 1st. He said, "Watch what happens." When I saw Castle, I knew he was going to be a great pro. He just oozed talent, and once he went in, the team went to a different level. That was it. They were a different team. They were a completely different team. Once he became a big part of their team, and they were a great team. Is there a great team this year? Probably not. There's some good teams. Flag healthy, Duke's a really good team. Florida right now, Auburn's had the best season, but right now Florida has been the most impressive team, and I'd give Houston the number 2 slot. Those are the most impressive, and right now the third most impressive team in the country to me over the last 6 weeks, St. John's. I'd say it's 1, Florida, 2, Houston, 3, St. John's over the last 6 weeks. So they are very deserving of their seed. They didn't deserve to be a 1 seed based on the level of competition they played because the league was not that good this year. Now, tonight I give you the big picture. Tomorrow we'll go through the individual games, although I will go through the St. John's little 14 2-game bracket, which I think will be a very successful one for St. John's. I think St. John's will win their 2 games, go to the Sweet 16, and then get ready for what will be a very eventful second weekend, unless they get lucky and 3 seed Texas Tech and 1 seed Florida have somehow been derailed. The brackets in my mind from toughest to weakest. The strongest bracket is very much a toss-up now that Iowa State is not at full strength. It's a very much a toss-up between the West and the Southeast as the strongest brackets. The Southeast has Auburn, it has Michigan State, it has Iowa State, it has Texas A&M, which is a very, very good team and a very well coached team, and has beaten Auburn. It has Michigan, which just won the Big Ten. It has Marquette. It has Louisville. It has Creighton. It has a 10 seed New Mexico coached by Richard Pitino, who, yes, has been mentioned at Villanova. The guys you're hearing at Villanova right now are the VCU coach, the Northwestern coach, and Richard Pitino. That bracket was weakened a little bit by Iowa State admitting already that they will not be 100%. They had a 3-game losing streak because they were hurting, and they lost to BYU in the conference tournament because they were hurting. Now, Midwest bracket is solid. The West fights the Southeast as the strongest. You have Florida. You have St. John's. You have Texas Tech. You have a Maryland team that has a great starting five, but a very weak bench. But you also have a good Missouri team, Kansas, which has culture, Yukon, which is still dangerous, and Oklahoma, which is very well coached, and a Drake team, which is coached by one of the hotter coaching candidates in the country, who I think will probably wind up with a huge job in the Midwest. He won multiple national championships, Division II. He's now won 30 games at Drake. McCullum is a very talented coach. I think you will see him in the Midwest in a big job this year. Houston has Tennessee, which is a legitimately good team. Lost to Florida today. I don't think they are as good as Florida, but I think they're really good. I think Kentucky is vastly overrated and should have been a 3. I thought they should have been a 5. But I thought Clemson is underrated at a 5. I think they're better than that. I think they really have been underrated this year. And Illinois is weird. They're like the little girl with the curl. They can play like a top 5 team. They can play like a lousy team. And they've had a ton of injuries. They've had like 7 different starting lineups this year. UCLA is not bad. Gonzaga's always dangerous, and they're in the 8-9 game against Georgia. And remember, Georgia has wins over some good teams, including one named St. John's back in November. The weakest bracket by far, and it might as well be the Duke Invitational, is the East. I think if you're doing those brackets, you should get extra points if you pick against Duke for the Final Four, because I think so many people are going to pick Duke out of this bracket. Alabama's hurting. Check them and make sure they're healthy. They did not come out of this weekend healthy. They can, on their game offensively, can beat any team in the country, but they're not going to do it with defense. They're going to do it with just an overwhelming offense. From there, I don't like what they put together here. Wisconsin, I have not been a huge fan of all year. I know they beat Michigan State, and I didn't think they would. Michigan State was very upset they lost that game. They're going to come out loaded in their first NCAA tournament game because they were really upset they lost that game. Arizona, I'm not buying. Oregon, I like the coach. He's tricky in the tournament. I don't love the team. BYU, offensive team. Not that that's a knock, but not what we're talking about. Mississippi State, Baylor, Vandy, VCU's okay, but again, not on this level. I think the East is, woefully weak. I have to admit, I will be stunned if anybody but Duke. If Cooper Flag is healthy, and I heard John say tonight that he is healthy, that he will be fine, that it's, full speed ahead. If that's true, I will be stunned if Duke doesn't come out of the East. Their bracket, I saw one of these metric things done, Duke's bracket was statistically so much weaker than the other 3 brackets, it was off the charts. I mean, it was like 16 points difference. That's how bad it is. I think this bracket is dreadful. I wish St. John's was in this bracket. The other 3 brackets are all tough. I thought the SEC was the Southeast was a little tougher than the West if Iowa State was Iowa State, because I had Iowa State, when healthy, as a top 5 team all year. But they're not healthy, and they're not going to be healthy. Okay? They already admitted guys are out. And they might have 2 guys out. So that's a big problem for them. 2 critical guys. That's a big problem. That would swing it to the West by just a smidgen. But all 3 brackets, Southeast, West, and then Houston. The Houston bracket is not as tough, but Tennessee is legit. Clemson is legit, and you got some dangerous teams down the ladder a little bit in that bracket. I don't like Kentucky. I don't like Purdue. And really, I think Kentucky is just on name value and the fact that they're in the SEC. I think that they have not been a big-time team, especially in the second half of the year. I do not love them by any stretch of the imagination. Now, St. John's, which will have a ton of fans in Providence, unfortunately, after that, you're going to have to buy some, you're going to have to fly. Omaha, St. John's has been installed as an 18.5 point favorite. Mons can check me on that on Bet Rivers so that I make sure it's the right number for Bet Rivers. Have they moved it already? I saw 18.5 already for St. John's. We'll do all the numbers tomorrow. You can go get them at Bet Rivers. Okay. Go to the Bet Rivers app for everything. They'll have everything up to date. They'll have all the futures. They'll have all the parlays. They'll have everything, all the action, every kind of creative thing you want. They'll have for the tournament. Okay, so just go to the app and get it at betrivers.com. Then they're going to play the winner of Kansas and Arkansas. John did a good job getting an Arkansas team which hasn't been healthy all year. And in his first year there, he's done a good job getting that team into the NCAA tournament. That's a plus that he got him in there in his first year. They played, I think they were 8-4 down the stretch. They were highly competitive. Kansas has had a miserable season. Yes, it's Self. Now, Self and Calipari, as you know, were involved in one of the classic games ever when Memphis met Kansas in the final. And remember, and I remember it well because I bet Memphis to win the tournament before the tournament started. And Memphis, as you know, blew a big lead in the final 2 minutes. And Chalmers, they turned the ball over 3 times, and Chalmers hit 2 amazing threes, and they lost that game to Kansas. It was a stinging loss for Calipari, who obviously has overcome it, but it was a rough one, and it was a big win for Self in Kansas. So they have met. Self's a Hall of Famer, Calipari's a Hall of Famer, and obviously Pitino's a Hall of Famer. So you're going to have a Hall of Fame matchup there unless Omaha pulls a stunning upset, which I wouldn't count on. It will be a big. Kansas travels great. Arkansas, their fans always support them. So you're going to get support from both fan bases, but it's going to be a St. John's house, let's be honest. Okay. I think they're going to have a great. Listen, it's been a long time since they've been in the NCAA tournament. It's been a long time since they've won an NCAA tournament game. I think they're going to be sitting pretty on their way to the Sweet 16, which is going to completely make them the darlings of this town over the next 2 weeks as they get ready, as they win these tournament games. Their love affair that the city's having with them, and it's burgeoning. I mean, that was a good scene at the Garden. The Garden was loud. They really got the Garden rocking. Okay. I mean, you had you had the front running fans even showing up for St. John's. So the bottom line is, I thought they had to get to the Sweet 16 off this year to have a successful season. But hey, with each win, the expectations grow. I know now people are thinking, hey, Final Four. That second weekend, if it's St. John's and they have to go through Texas Tech in the 2-3 matchup and then go through Florida in the regional final, you couldn't have two tougher games. Those are brutal games. That Florida game would be a classic. The Texas Tech game, Texas Tech won't back down. That's not a team that's going to push. St. John's going to push. St. John's has pushed a lot of teams around this year. They are not going to push Texas Tech around. First weekend, I think they're going to make mincemeat of these teams. If they have a close game this first weekend, I will be very surprised. The second weekend, they're going to earn every inch that they take. That's going to be as good. Now, maybe somebody gets picked off. I don't think so, though. I think they're going to have to go through the top. I think that form is going to hold in that bracket. And I think you're going to get those showdowns. And you know what? Hey, that's the idea. You want to play those teams. You want to beat the best. You want to go through the best teams. That's the idea. You want to prove you belong. Now, a lot of this tournament, as you know, those first couple of days is about upsets. All right, I want to predict a 5-12 because it happens every year, which it does. I want to knock off some 4s and 3s. I want to knock off a 2 with a 15. Have a ball. You'll get some wrong, you'll get some right. You'll have some where your team's up 10 at half and loses by 25. I mean, that's the way it goes. Is a 1 going to beat a 16? Probably not. Has it happened? Yes. Is it going to happen this year? I doubt it. But you never know. That's why we love those games. I mean, we sit there and hope. And when the game goes to 25, you go to another game. But all the individual games and the matchups and the odds and which ones they got the crazy odds on and which ones, look like they made mistakes on and this and that and the seating's wrong and everything else, we'll get to all that. We'll do that tomorrow. That'll pretty much be tomorrow and Tuesday as we get ready for the playing games. You got a couple interesting matchups. You got North Carolina, which, hey, North Carolina, San Diego State, that's a good game. Texas Xavier, good game. Good games. Those teams are okay. Xavier's okay. They're well coached. They finished the season strong. I have no problem with Xavier being in the tournament. And Carolina came within a lane violation of beating Duke the other night. I'm sure there's a lot of people who bet Duke against Carolina without Flag playing, and they were counting their money at half when Duke was up 21, and then Duke somehow blew a 21-point lead to Carolina. I don't know how, but they did. And Carolina, if not for a lane violation, would have had the game in overtime. They went to the line with a chance to win the game. They were down 1. They missed the first free throw, made the second, but it was a lane violation. They fouled. They got up 3. They missed the 3, and Duke survived. they're a different team with Cooper Cup because he not only is their best player and is the best player in the country, he also is the leader. Even as a freshman, he is a very unique player. I got to tell you, I mean Cooper Cup. I mean Cooper Flag. Okay, I was wrong about him. Like last year, Harrison says to me, "Dad, there's this guy in Maine. He's the next Larry Bird." I said, "Wait a second. You're telling me there's a guy in Maine who they say is the next Larry Bird? They have their mind. Dad, he's coming to play on Long Island." He turned out to be that good. Now, I am not yet comparing him to Larry Bird, but I can tell you this: at the same stage, he's better at some things than Larry Bird was, but he does not shoot it as well as Larry does. And although he's ornery, I don't know if he's as ornery as Larry was, because Larry was really ornery, and Larry could shoot it. Forget it. Before Larry hurt his back, he was as good as a basketball player can be. But this kid is going to be the first player picked in the draft, and he's going to have a major impact on this tournament. There's no question. And he is a solid gold winner. I don't think there's any question about it. And he is the heart and the soul and the engine for this Duke team. When you look at those four teams, Duke with Flag healthy, they're legit. Auburn, you got to be a little worried right now. I know their coach since back in his BC days. So I go back with him 100 years. And he's a really good coach. But this team has lost 3 of its last 4 games, and they look lousy against Ole Miss the other day. I watched them. They've hit a wall, and I would be concerned. Houston, he has done a great job with that. And this team, if Houston wasn't hurt last year, they could have won the whole thing. Or they at least could have gone and played Yukon a great game in the final. Or in the Final Four. I don't remember if they would have matched up in the semis or the final. You'd have to remind me. But they should have gone to the Final Four. They got hurt. This Houston team is better offensively. I don't think it's 100% as good defensively. I think it might be like 98%. But they're terrific defensively, and they're better, much better at making the outside shot. And then Florida, like I told you, Clayton's had a great year. They have 3 guards. Their bigs are great offensive rebounders. Tennessee's a tough team, and they couldn't keep Florida off the boards for anything. This Florida team could absolutely win it all, and I wouldn't blink. They are really good, and I think the last 2 months they've been the best team in the country. So they are legitimate in every way. So to review, and again, like I said, we'll go through each of the games and the upsets and all that stuff. We'll do that Monday and Tuesday. I think St. John's is in a tough neighborhood. Their second weekend, they're going to have to roll up their sleeves and earn it. The first weekend, I think they're going to have a picnic. I think that the brackets go from west, southeast, both very hard, to Midwest, pretty hard, to East, just a joke. I think that's the Duke Invitational. And I don't expect to see too many places where they're picking anybody. I don't think they're going to be picking Alabama unless they see that Alabama's healthy, and I don't think Alabama's going to be healthy. I think you're going to see Duke get picked everywhere to the point where you might have to say, "Hey, pick somebody other than Duke, and you get a bonus in the when you do these brackets," because everybody's going to pick Duke. Not everybody's gonna pick Auburn. You're gonna get people picking Michigan State. You're gonna get people even picking Texas A&M. I think you would have gotten people picking Iowa State, but they're gonna be banged up now. You might even get somebody picking Michigan. Houston, I still think you're gonna get some Tennessee people. You might even get a smattering of Clemson people. And out west, you're gonna get a ton of Florida. You're gonna get a ton of St. John's. You're gonna get some Texas Tech. You might even get some Maryland because Maryland's okay. They're a good team. Problem is they don't have a lot of depth. The highest scoring starting five in the country. I would have loved to see St. John's play Duke in Newark, but I wouldn't mind seeing St. John's play Florida. That'll be a fun game. Then we'll find out how good the St. John's team really is. And as far as who got in the tournament and who didn't, I know there's people wanting to be outraged about Carolina. How can you be outraged about North Carolina? I mean, that's like going into a shoe store and being outraged about Nike. I mean, in the world of college basketball, Carolina's a brand name. Just the uniforms worth points. I mean, hey, they're a brand name. I doubt they're going to embarrass themselves. But I think they got a tough matchup in the playing game because I have a lot of respect for San Diego State. I really do. They come prepared in these tournament games. They really do. And I would not be surprised if they win, but that doesn't mean I care that they're in. I don't. I really don't because there was nobody out knocking on the door who had to get in. Not that I see anyway. The 8-9s always fun. Mississippi State, Baylor, they could have done better. Louisville, Creighton, I like it. Creighton's dangerous. They got a point guard who's been off lately, but he can make threes. They got a lot of guys who can make threes. They got some good young players. That Jackson McAndrew, the next wave of Creighton players are there. Jackson McAndrew, Green. They got some really good young players. They really do. Davis, Jackson McAndrew, all of the Green. Those guys are going to be good. Louisville, they're tough. They're okay. Marquette in the 7-10, that's a heck of a game. That'll be a very combative game. Two very good guards. Gonzaga, Georgia. Again, no knock on Georgia. They've had some big wins, but I like Gonzaga in that game. And then Yukon and Oklahoma. I hope Yukon wins because I want to see Florida play Yukon, but I'm going to tell you right now, the way this Yukon team plays defense, Florida's going to kill them. This Yukon team is they can still score and they can still play their offense, and it's an offense that a lot of teams don't play, and they're very good at it, but their defense and their defensive effort a lot of times stinks. Let's be honest. And a lot of times Caravan's been lost at sea this year. He really has. I think UConn would love to get a 8-9 win against Oklahoma. I think they will, and then I think they might regret it in the second half against Florida because they might get killed. I think Florida, somebody's going to want to put a beating on UConn because here's the two-time defending champs. They're going to hear about how they can go for 3 straight championships, and that team is going to be in the locker room. Let me out to play UConn, and then they're going to find out that UConn's just not the same team, and they're going to kill them. Danny, he's not going to back down. He's going to say something crazy, which we know, which we love. That's what we love about Danny. I love the way he acts. I really do. I got a kick out of this. And the guy's won a couple of championships. He can act like that. Now, the assistant, Murray, shouldn't be going up to McDermott and giving him what for when the kid dunks the ball the other night. I mean, let the head coach handle it. What are you doing as an assistant coach going after the head coach? What are you out of your mind? Lucky McDermott didn't put him in the third row. That'd be fun. I always like the 8-9s. Louisville Creighton's a good one. Gonzaga Georgia should be a pretty good one. I think Gonzaga will win. I think UConn will beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma's well coached though, really well coached. But they're not as good as UConn. If UConn shows up, I worry about UConn because their defensive effort has been really up and down. And Baylor State, that leaves me cold. That whole bracket leaves me cold. The East just completely just give it to Duke and move on. Tell Duke, you know what? Let Flair get healthy. Let's give him a couple of buys and let him go on because I hate that bracket. Really, I don't know what they were thinking with that bracket. They imported half the West. Arizona, Oregon, BYU, St. Mary's, Montana. I mean, enough. And if you're going to follow the Red Storm around and jump on that ever burgeoning Red Storm bandwagon, they should have a very, very successful return to the NCAA tournament this weekend. Now, I got to jump up for a second here. I apologize because before the show I was on my phone a lot, and then I looked and I had no charge, so I had to put my phone in charge, and I need it for a second. So let me go get it. All right, thank you. All right. Now that the NCAA tournament is here, it's time to sign up for a Bet Rivers account and get in on all the action. Sign up for an account now and play on the Bet Rivers app. So go to the Bet Rivers app, get all your stuff, and get ready for what will be a lot of fun. We'll put up some tournament picks every day. We'll tell you here's an upset I like. Here's like this game, like that game. I like to do that. So we'll have a lot of fun with that. We'll be doing that throughout the tournament. I remember the newsletter. Sign up today for the podcast newsletter at MikeFrancesa.podcast.com, where you'll get videos and maybe some merch and some different things. So check that out too. But remember, go to the tournament, go to the app and sign up for the tournament if you haven't already. Remember, you have that. You have obviously the NBA and the hockey playoffs coming. You have baseball right around the corner. I was driving down 95 today, and I was listening to my first baseball game of the season. I turned on the Yankees, and I was listening to Dave Sims and the new voice of the Yankees along with Susan. I was listening to them do a game, and I was thinking that when's the next story, or the first story, if there hasn't been, maybe there's been one already because I had been in Florida a lot, but I heard them say that Judge was like 2 for 18, and I know Soto's got like 6 homers and is hitting 450 or something. I know it's spring training, but when's the first time they blow that up and make that a story? Hey, it's spring training. Who cares if he gets a hit? Life starts on opening day. You know that. Nothing in the spring matters. But you know what? I'm happy that my old buddy Francona's back. He couldn't stay away. He's back doing what he should do. He's a manager and a great one. And baseball's better when he's managing. That's all there is to it. He is better when he's managing. So, hey, before you know it, baseball will be upon us day in, day out. The Masters right around the corner. And if you paid attention, the players, Rory and Spawn are 12 under. Spawn had a birdie putt on 18, about maybe 22 feet to win it, and he just left it like one rotation short. It was right in the hole. And now he's got to play 3 or more, but it starts with 16, 17, 18, a 3-hole aggregate playoff tomorrow against one of the great players in the world, in Rory. So that's tomorrow morning at 9 if you care, and the Players, which is a very big tournament. And before you know it, the Masters will be upon us. So plenty of big things are coming up. Like I said, we're going to be with you wall to wall all week. We'll see you tomorrow.